There's a question here. It was in response to a recent video I did, a breakthrough video where I talk about when non-attachment becomes an attachment. And the question is, thank you so much for sharing, Kim. How humbling it must feel too. I think you mentioned towards the end there that you might have set a certain standard of how to be emotionally, and I didn't consciously realize that I was trying to follow in those footsteps as well. Often feeling that I shouldn't be having such big emotional reactions, and if I did, it's because I didn't have the mental fortitude. However, I would have moments where I think or say, but it's understandable why I would have emotional responses to situations that will make anyone react in certain ways. Whether it's because my physical body was tired, or I'd experienced something really intense that was new to me, or whatever it was. I've also heard that our emotions are messengers, trying to tell us that something doesn't feel right, or there is something to look at in terms of separate selves. Now I find it extremely helpful that you were able to point out the difference between reacting and creating patterns, and reacting and letting the emotional body calm back down. Is there any way you can elaborate on that? Also, when you mention that you are going to work on this self you discovered, what might that look like? Okay, so what I said in that video is that I had this view of the Buddha who was confronted by the demons of Mara before he could go into nirvana. And he had to be non-attached to whatever they were directing at him. And I had thought that that meant that in order to be truly non-attached, you didn't have any reactions at all. In other words, you didn't have any feelings, any thoughts, or any reaction at the identity level of your mind. You were almost like a Buddha statue instead of a living person. So what I realized when I had this breakthrough is that you're always going to have, the emotions are the emotions, they're always going to fluctuate. The thoughts, they're always going to fluctuate. But the difference is that emotions, to illustrate, they're just like water. Emotions are often compared to the water element. And so the water can rise up in a wave, but if there's no force acting on it, it just falls down again and it's calm again. And I realized that's the way to deal with emotions, is to see that you just need to allow the emotions to rise up and fall back down, without creating some mental overlay that, oh, as a spiritual person, I shouldn't have feelings at all. But of course, I also said in that video that there are many emotions that come from these subconscious selves, and they are unbalanced emotions. And this is what you can say here, that I've also heard that our emotions are messengers, trying to tell us that something doesn't feel right, and there's something to look at in terms of separate selves. And that's very correct. If you monitor your emotional reactions, you could say, the way I see it, and maybe that doesn't work for everybody, but the way I have over the years have developed this is that I can feel when I have an emotion that's just an emotion, it's just energy. And I can feel that when I have an emotion that's charged with this overlay of something that comes from a separate self, that I feel very attached, for example, to being right. When I was younger, I was very attached to being right, not being wrong. And so whenever I was in a situation where I felt like I'd made a mistake or I could be proven wrong, I would have these very unbalanced emotions. So I'm just using that as one example to see that there are emotions that are just energy rising and falling. And then there are emotions that come from these separate selves. And those are messengers, in a sense we can say. They're trying to show us there is an unbalanced separate self there that's causing these emotions. And if we follow the emotion, we can come to expose the self, see the belief behind it, and let it go. Now I find it extremely helpful that you were able to point out the difference between reacting and creating patterns, and reacting and letting the emotional body calm back down. Is there any way you can elaborate on that? Well, beyond what I just said, I would say that you can't really, you have to be careful, because the mind will always do what the mind does. It doesn't matter what idea you put out there. There is the linear, rational, analytical mind that will do its trick on it. So, based on what I said, Ideally, you should be in a situation where you can have emotions that arise, but they're never really extreme emotions, right? They're not emotions that totally overwhelm you, totally color you. They're just emotions. You're able to actually observe them as they arise and fall. But then you can have these emotions that are stronger emotions. So what I'm saying is, you can take what I said and create now a mental image, an ideal in your mind that says, oh yeah, I should have these, my emotional body should just be allowed to rise and fall, and there should be no patterns I'm creating. So now the linear mind will say, now I have to monitor myself. And I have to, when I have these emotions that don't calm down, then I have to mentally do something, or yeah, these patterns that carry on, I have to mentally do something to stop these patterns. But that's not really what the true meaning is, right? The emotions that have a charge, as I said, they come from a subconscious self. It's not a matter of suppressing those emotions. They are, as the person says, messengers. There's something unresolved you need to resolve. So the only way to come to a point where the emotions can just rise and fall is to resolve the subconscious selves. But what I was saying also that I realized is that even if you have resolved some of these subconscious selves, you can still have, that causes the emotions, you can still have a subconscious self, which is what I realized I had, that says, as a spiritual person, I should always be cool, calm, and collected. I should always be non-attached. So that means that I had a self that said, whenever I have emotions, I shouldn't have it, and so I should try and suppress the emotions. And that means when you can now go into, you have this subconscious self that says, as a spiritual person, you shouldn't have any reactions, but now you can, by reacting to your own emotions, you are reinforcing that self. So now you are actually using a certain ideal of what it means to be a spiritual person to create a subconscious self that seeks to suppress all emotions. So what I'm saying is here that, first of all, no emotions should be suppressed. Okay? It is not constructive to suppress emotions. Well, it can be in extreme situations. Yeah, I have to correct myself there. If you're in a life-threatening situation, you can't just sit down and feel sorry for yourself. You have to suppress the emotion, do what you have to do to survive, and then you can always process the emotion later. So, but aside from these kind of situations, you don't want to suppress emotions, right? Because there are those emotions that come from the subconscious selves, and they are messengers, so you look at them, what does it say about the unresolved psychology, and then you resolve it, you work on it. So, but there are many emotions, this is what I realized in my breakthrough. There are emotions that are just emotions. They're just reactions, and they just rise, and you just let them fall down. You're not suppressing them. You just let them fall down again. But when you add this mental overlay that I'm talking about, that you shouldn't even have these emotions, then you're giving them life, and now you're reinforcing a subconscious self. And so the trick is to really look at your emotions. Are they very strong? Is there a certain attachment? Then you look for the subconscious self. But other emotions, you just ignore them, basically. I mean, they're not messengers, right? You cannot say that all emotions are messengers, because you just react to a situation. I mean, let me take a situation that I think many people can recognize. You're watching a movie, right? And it's a moving story of somebody who overcomes difficulties, and you're sitting there and you have tears in your eyes and you're crying. But when the movie is over, you just forget the emotions. Now, there could be that the movie triggers a subconscious self in you, so you have some attached emotions, but a lot of times you're watching a movie, you have tears in your eyes, and then the movie is over, and now you basically forget about it. You're not carrying it with you. And so So this is the one thing I would say there. Some emotions, when you don't have any attachments, when you don't have any strong thoughts, analyzing them, they're just emotions. They're just a reaction. You just let them rise, you just let them fall, and then that's it. Once the water is calm again, it's like there was never any wave, right? This is the magic of water. I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but I grew up around boats, so I'm used to being on the water, and there can be waves. But what I actually love the most is being on the water when it's completely flat, completely calm. And so you think about the magic here, that the same water can be turbulent waves or completely calm. Because the water doesn't carry any forms with it over time. And that's ideally how our emotional bodies should be. They react, they calm down, it's like it was never there. Then they react again, they calm down, but there's nothing that carries it on. The water is just untouched. Now, the last question, also when you mention that you are going to work on this self you discovered, what might that look like? Well, typically what I do when I discover that I have some kind of self is that if I feel there's a very strong emotional charge, I will give some decrees where I invoke light from the Ascended Masters, typically violet flame, for example, to consume the energy that's stored in the self. Because the energy, as I said, forms an energy veil. It's hard to see the self behind it. But then what I do is I first of all ask the Ascended Masters for help to see this. I often ask Mother Mary and Jesus because they're the ones I'm working with a lot, but it should be whatever master you feel close to. So I'm asking them to help me see what I don't see. But I'm also looking at this situation from different angles. And I have in the past read psychological books about certain issues, but now I'm more, like I just try to look at it from different angles. And I don't do this in an analytical way. I'm not really thinking analytically with a linear mind. I'm just sort of asking certain questions, looking at it from different angles, and then I let it go. And then I just wait. And within a certain time, sometimes hours, sometimes days, sometimes weeks, an impulse comes to me. Now I see that aspect of the self. And so gradually, over time, that just resolves it. And I actually, this event happened now, a couple of months ago, I think. And it's not like I really made an effort to look at this self, but I feel like it's pretty much been resolved. I don't right now at least sense anything, but it may come later that I receive some further insight about it. So we'll see what happens. But I certainly feel that I have seen it from different angles. And it was mainly really this, what really helped me was this. Gosh, you've been trying to turn yourself into a Buddha statue that had no feelings instead of a living being that just allows the feelings to rise and calm down again. Ebb and flow, ebb and flow. Just let the emotions do what the emotions are designed to do and don't be disturbed about it. And it was really seeing that actually resolved a lot for me, because now it was like, as the conscious you, I could see, oh, this is a self I've had that has had this image of how I should be as a spiritual person. And it's like, once you see the illusion, you also see the higher reality, and you're shifting out of the illusion.